Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Rosenberg. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning at the Office of Catholic Schools. Thank you for joining us today. We have schools from Chicagoland joining us, and I'm so happy to have you here today with lots of different teachers and principals, and I'm hoping to give you a little bit of information on social emotional learning, but then the real idea of today's session is that we're going to open it up for questions, and we're going to be able to work through some teacher thoughts around students and how we support them. I just want to start with like a moment of gratitude for your work as teachers this year. This year more than ever, our students have needed us to be present, and we know how stressful of a year this has been for everyone. And so we're at the Office of Catholic Schools and myself are extremely grateful for your dedication to yourself and to your students in this school year. So hopefully you can see my slides. In this webinar, you've joined in listen only mode. So you can participate in the webinar by typing in questions in the question box, and you can feel free to do that throughout kind of my first few minutes of presentation, and then as we go along in the Q&A session. So if you look at your dashboard, it should be kind of on your right side. You should be able to see a box that says questions. You can feel free to type any questions in there that are relevant to student well-being, teacher well-being, social emotional teaching, explicit instruction, climate and culture, any kind of student issues that might be coming up that you think might be relevant for the group to hear the answer to. So feel free and please do that, and that'll be a lot of our session today. But I'll give you some things to think about as we go along here. So just to introduce myself, and I also have another colleague on the line who's going to help us. So my name is Andrea Rosenberg. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning at the Office of Catholic Schools. I came to the Office of Catholic Schools in September. Before that, I led a program called Resilient Schools at Mercy Home for Boys and Girls, in which we taught teachers about the impacts of trauma and adversity and how to support students in the classroom. I'm a former Catholic school elementary teacher. I taught in Chicago. I taught the younger grades. I taught third grade, and really passionate about helping support teachers, support some of our most challenging students. I oftentimes in this role consult with counselors and social workers, but my focus is really to see what us teachers can do in supporting students in the classroom, students who struggle, students who have mental health challenges, students just having a bad day. And Erica, do you want to hop on and introduce yourself as well?
Hello, everyone. My name is Erika Gallardo, and I am with mostly, I guess, more focused on Hispanic engagement and English language learners. So I'm going to be technical support for Andrea today. Happy to be with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Erica. Thanks for joining us. So I wanted to begin our session with a little bit of mindfulness. When we use mindfulness in the classroom, this can be really helpful to our students. It can help them focus. It can help them calm their bodies down or kind of move their bodies in a way that can help them get ready for school. And so I know after a long day of teaching, and it can feel like you're not ready to kind of like tune into this webinar. So I wanted to take a moment. I'm actually going to shut off my camera and lead you through around a 3-minute mindfulness activity. It'll just give us a chance to kind of settle in. This practice is called the seated twist. Find a comfortable position with your back straight. Feel your feet on the floor. Rest your hands in your lap. Relax your shoulders back and down. Let your whole body be still. Place your right hand on your lower back and your left hand on the outside of your right leg. Twist from your waist to the right. Look over your right shoulder. Keep your back straight and relax your shoulders down. Gently close your eyes or leave them open. Notice the feeling in your body as you hold the twist. Now turn your upper body back to the center. Place your left hand on your lower back and your right hand on the outside of your left leg. Twist from your waist to the left. Look over your left shoulder. Keep your back straight and relax your shoulders down. Notice the feeling in your body as you hold the twist. Now turn your upper body back to the center. Relax your arms and hands. Feel the air moving in and out of your nose. Now take a deep breath in and breathe out slowly. Notice how you feel. If your eyes are closed, gently open them. Welcome back, everyone. I like to model a bit of how we can use kind of the ideas of social emotional learning in presentations like this, right? We're all coming from different classrooms, different experiences throughout. You'll need some time to settle in, just like students do. Sometimes taking a few quiet moments, sometimes leading through an activity, right, for everyone to get settled. It's a really good practice for your classroom that doesn't take kind of direct instruction around SEL, but is an integration of SEL thought and practices in our classrooms. So thank you for joining me in on that. I know sometimes it's hard to find a quiet space after a busy day, but hopefully you were able to use that quiet space to find some calm. So I thought I'd just get started with a few basics. Even if you've been through some of the information about SEL, maybe we can find something new. So what is social emotional learning? SEL is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, skills necessary to understand, manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. I like to just read that directly for you because I think it has a lot of really good information in it. And when you look at those phrases at the end of that definition, what I see really is what we're doing in elementary school, how we want to create the young children to be responsible citizens in our society, right? We want them to be able to understand and manage their emotions. Think of how powerful that can be in the classroom, how well kids can work with you and with other kids when they can do that. Right? We want them to set and achieve positive goals, to feel and show empathy for each other. A lot of what we do in our classrooms is learning how to navigate relationships, and SEL is teaching students how to do that. So hopefully you can take just a quick second here, and when you look at those phrases, pick one of them that feels like, man, my students could do that. Everything would be a little bit more productive in my classroom. Which one of those phrases are you thinking about? The manage emotions, achieve positive goals, show empathy, or establish and maintain positive relationships, or responsible decision making? So as you pick those, I'm going to use the CASTLE, which is a group actually based out of Chicago, but really is nationwide on social emotional learning practices. They're kind of the gold standard for these things. So this information is coming from them. So when we look at that definition of SEL, it's broken into the five CASTLE competencies, and they're represented on this wheel. So the first is self-awareness. When we think about self-awareness, we think about teaching, identifying emotions, recognizing their strengths. Students have awareness of self and sense of self-confidence. We also look at self-management, the ability to control your impulses, to manage stress, self-discipline, self-motivation, the ability to set goals. This area is actually one of the areas that I think we work on I work with students on the most, and teachers, because if students have difficulty managing themselves in the classroom, it really leads to a lot of other challenges in the classroom. The next piece is social awareness, right? The ability to have empathy for others, to look at another person's perspective, to appreciate and respect others in the classroom and in their world. Relationship skills, the ability to communicate and engage, to build relationships and solve conflicts. And the last piece is around responsible decision making, right? Can students identify problems, analyze situations, figure out their ethical responsibility in the issue? Oftentimes, this is a piece that comes, there are ways we can do it when kids are really young, but I'm seeing it become really important in middle school, and lots of SEL curriculums and teaching is around responsible decision making as students get older. So I thought for kind of for a quick strategy, it's always good to be able to take like one thing away from our presentation. We'd focus on relationship building for a moment. So I've been in lots of presentations, and I'm sure you have too, that how important it is to build relationships with our students and all of that. However, that can feel a little too broad at times. And so I want to give you kind of some more concrete ideas around what this could look like in practice. So I want you to take a minute here and pick one student in your classroom who you're kind of struggling with. Like they seem to be pushing back a little bit. You're having trouble connecting with them. You've tried, it's almost March. You've tried lots of things in your tool bag, right? And things just, it doesn't seem to be working. You can't get their behavior to be effective in the classroom. You can't get them to work with others. What might it be, right? Pick your one student. All right, you got this student in your mind? Okay, so this strategy is called 2 by 10. We're gonna support this student by spending 2 minutes per day for 10 days in a row by connecting with them individually and offering extra social emotional support. So we're gonna pick this student 10 days in a row. This strategy that I'm going to describe in a minute is going to build the student's self-awareness, their social awareness, and their relationship skills, right? So that's 3 of the 5 CASEL competencies. And this is what you're going to do. You've already chosen your student. So you're going to find this student and maybe find a particular time of day and start a conversation with them, right? To build a productive conversation, right, we're going to have to initiate this connection. So you're going to focus on 3 things throughout this conversation. Brevity. The conversation is short, right? 2 minutes or under, right? It can be 30 seconds. It shouldn't just be hello, but it might start like that, right? So we don't need to think about engaging in, a long lunch conversation with the student. This is going to start small. We want student voice included. We want to invite them to share something non-academic with you about their life, a day in their life, okay? Non-academic focused, anything else, right, appropriate for school, give them a space to share that. Honesty, model transparency and authenticity by sharing something personal or non-academic with a student, right? It might be something about when you were their age, right? Or the movie that you saw, what movie, have you seen any movies recently? And then share a movie that you saw. Or that you're really looking forward to seeing Encanto, or what are you looking forward to seeing, if you've chosen movies as your top. Right, the content of your conversation should not relate to the student's schoolwork or behavior. It should have kind of nothing to do with school and all on, semi-personal. And this is going to initiate this connection. You're going to try this for 10 days in a row. If it were me in the classroom, I would need to keep a check mark for every day that I did it and maybe what time I was aiming at doing it. If you miss one, that's okay. Start again. It's not gonna, it's gonna be okay, but you're gonna find time to focus on relationship building for this student 2 minutes a day, 10 times in a row. So that's kind of your, if you will say, your magic wand to take away from today on social emotional learning. This is not explicit instruction around SEL, but it's integrating these practices into your classroom. So you might be saying well, why should we do this? Shouldn't students learn these skills outside of school? Shouldn't, they be able to build a relationship or respect an adult? And my claim, and I think many people's claim, including CASEL's, is that all learning is social emotional, right? all learning happens in the context of relationships. And in order to get the best learning out of our students, we need to be building these relationships and these skills in order for them to absorb the content that we want to share with them. There have been a lot of research that shows the links between student gains and their social emotional well-being and the skills that they develop through social emotional instruction. And we benefit from it too. One of the reasons that I lead a mindfulness activity at the beginning of the session is because it helps me settle into the session, it helps me take some deep breaths and get ready for the presentation. SEL and mindfulness-based practices do the same things for us. They help us manage in the classroom, and that's in many ways just as important as it is that students are managing in the classroom. The better we are doing, the better they do. So kind of my last note here, and I've said this throughout the way, but SEL isn't just one thing. And I think that's kind of where we sometimes get stuck, is that it's a few things. And I like to think about this tool a lot when I work with schools, is there are kind of three components of SEL that we want to keep an eye out for. We have the supportive classroom environment. That might be something like a mindfulness activity, a calm corner a student can go to, how we respond to students when they're angry or upset, right? How we build relationships with them. The relationship building 2x10 strategy that I gave you would be on that leg of the stool. The next piece is explicit SEL instruction, right? Using a curriculum or using resources to talk about how do we build relationships? How do we develop social awareness or self-awareness? And the last piece is integrating SEL into our instruction. So when a student, for example, gets frustrated in the math classroom, we say something like, man, you look really frustrated. What's a strategy we can use to work through that frustration? Or when doing math discussions or literature discussions, how can we speak to each other in a way that's respectful, that's honoring everyone's opinions and making sure we're practicing and holding students accountable for that. So really integrating the SEL skills that we're learning through explicit instruction into our everyday instruction. And that's why I really encourage that teachers are teaching SEL instruction, because it really should be integrated into our classroom communities. So a last plug here, actually we'll do this at the end of the Q&A. But after going over those things around mindfulness and on the components of SEL and some pieces on relationship building, I want to give you a few minutes to think about, maybe it's a challenge in your classroom that you're having right now yourself. Maybe it's a challenge that a student is having in your classroom and you're thinking, man, if I could get a few tips on how to address this tomorrow, it would be really helpful. So go ahead and take a minute. If everybody could write a question in the chat, we'll look through them and see how we can help address them.
Just as a reminder, we do have a chat and a question. So if you put it in either one, we'll make sure to compile the information.
Yeah, Erica, I don't think they have a chat function. I think it's just you and I. So if they put them in the question box, then we can see them and share them widely.
Thank you.
So we have lots of different schools represented here. We're seeing some questions coming in. So we'll give you a few more minutes to type in that box. I see some questions coming through. If Laura had a question on behavior charts, could you just clarify for me, put something else in there about what do you mean by behavior charts? Like classroom behavior charts or kind of individual behavior charts, or both? That's fine. So Erica, do you wanna go ahead and ask some of those questions, and we'll let people keep adding?
Okay, so we have a question here. What are some ways to refocus pre-K students who are missing parents while at school?
Thanks for your question, Kim. This is a good one, and I think oftentimes happens after a long weekend, right? They're used to being at home, um, and they kind of get out of their school routine. So I'm thinking about a few things, and maybe you've tried some of them before. So forgive me if that's the case, but um, I'm thinking about making a plan with the student and parents around your students really missing you at school, right? What are some things we can do in the classroom? And I might ask the parent first for their suggestions. They may have dealt with this at daycare before. But also coming up with some strategies on your own. So I'm thinking about two strategies that came to my mind immediately. One is maybe there's a picture or something special that the family can send into school that can help the student with that feeling of loneliness or isolation when their parents aren't there. Because that's certainly an important relationship. However, we want them to be able to manage throughout the school day. The second thing is that making a plan with the student around what can you do when you miss your family member. So, and having the parent talk to them about this too. So it turns out I have a little 2-year-old who sometimes misses me at school, and he was home for a few days, and he said, what if I miss mommy when I'm at school? And I know you're not working with 2-year-olds, but some of the behavior seems to be the same. And what I'm thinking about is saying, it's okay to miss mom and dad, right? Kind of acknowledging and validating that behavior. What's something you can do when you miss mom and dad at school? When I use, for example, my husband at school, or when I'm at work, I need a hug, right? Would a hug feel good? Maybe it's a side hug. Maybe it's a hug of an animal that they brought that's special from home. Give them think of a strategy that might work, and that might help them kind of like move on from that feeling, right? So we're doing something with that emotion. And I like the idea of really working with the family on it, because it's the family who they're missing. And so if the family is a part of, like, when you miss mommy at school, like, that's okay. It's okay to miss mom and dad. What's something that you can do when that happens? Maybe there's a favorite song that the mom and dad like to sing. Maybe there's a picture they can look at. Maybe it's that hug that they need from their lovey in their locker or something. But think of kind of like an activity that can help them kind of manage that emotion in the moment and then help them move on. Those are kind of like what immediately came to my mind. I do think this is a pretty like typical developmental behavior. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that it's okay to miss mom and dad. There's nothing wrong with that. remind them that mom and dad come back at the end of the day. They always come back, right? And the more times they hear that and the more times they see that, hopefully the easier that will become. But I think having some of these strategies in our pockets are also going to help.
Next question is from Carrie. She wants to know what are some strategies to deal with 5 and 6-year-olds who are transitioning from napping every day?
And I'm assuming they're getting tired during the day and having a hard time kind of like focusing the whole day. So I'm thinking about their transitioning from their preschool classroom, that there is a quiet time. And maybe they're having trouble focusing after what would be a typical quiet time. And so I'm wondering if there is a time after lunch or recess that you do give them some time to kind of like decompress, some quiet. During nap time, they're having time alone. Even if they're not sleeping in preschool, they're having time to just like be by themselves. And kind of once you get into kindergarten, I think all of the constant social interaction can be really tiring. And so maybe we give them a space where they're hearing a story read after lunch or recess that is allowing them to kind of like tune out, decompress. I know when I taught 3rd grade, after lunch, like I would read, a continuing like novel to them, and they would have time to just maybe even lie on the floor or sit with their head down at their desk to just like kind of calm their bodies back from that lunch and recess break that can be sometimes chaotic. Typically in a preschool classroom, you'd have, allow them to sleep for a little bit, right? We're not going to allow this, read aloud to go on for, maybe it's 15 minutes and it's kind of allowing them to be on their own. Maybe it starts longer throughout that kindergarten year and then we get it shorter and shorter. So once they're at 1st grade, that they only need that break for a little bit. I would say, Carrie, if this is happening with a lot of your students, maybe you make a plan between preschool and kindergarten that you start transitioning kids out of their nap. At the beginning of kindergarten, maybe you do a quiet time and then you kind of wean them off of it because that's probably something that they're used to that we need to kind of like shorten over time.
And then we have that
we can go to the next one, I think, Erica.
Okay. Middle school students have become increasingly disrespectful in class, not listening, won't stop talking, etc. Geraldine has tried various classroom management techniques, but nothing seems to work for very long. Students engaged in setting rules are some of the techniques that she's tried, as well as positive reinforcement, behavior notices, waiting for students to be silent, conversations with parents. She's open to any new suggestions.
Awesome. Thanks, Geraldine. And I know this is have been a classroom teacher, it's really tough to be in a classroom that kind of continuously provides a lot of challenge. And I think many people on the call kind of like understand where you're coming from. So first to say is like, you're not alone on this. Being a classroom teacher is tough. I think you're right to be like thinking about, okay, what are all the things that I can try? I think your best approach, however, is going to be something very consistent. So kind of come up with a consistent approach, share it with the students, and then follow through on it. So that might be around, right, you're having some rules, it sounds like you set rules in the beginning of the school year, right? You're reviewing those, you're following through on them. Middle schoolers need boundaries. And so what happens when a student doesn't follow the rule in our class? What are the things in the school that we can do? Not necessarily anything, overly punitive, but students do need to know that we're here to engage in learning. And if you're not contributing to that, then there is a consequence in our school. So maybe thinking about what are those consequences in the classroom and how can they be teaching moments, right? But and not just kind of conversational, but we are actually setting boundaries with students. I'm just looking over your question again so I can think of other things. I am wondering if this classroom is also kind of very talkative and really wants to engage with each other a lot. And so I'm thinking about how can we use that energy in the classroom to be productive, to work in groups, to listen to each other talking, right? And so it's not just teacher lecturing, but it's students, presenting on information and sharing and giving feedback. How can they be involved if that social aspect is coming into this? In terms of being, I'm seeing a lot about like kids, in your comments about kids being disrespectful. I think I would also think about how you're handling yourself in the classroom and how you're building relationships with the students. So I might, one of the first things I might do is do that 2x10, is pick a student who has been really tough. Maybe you don't even pick your toughest student. Maybe you pick the second toughest student. Or if you have some like kind of, ringleaders in the classroom who are leading some of this, right? Maybe you try this strategy of 2x10 with them and see if you building some relationship and rapport with them, if you'll then be able to have some of those discipline conversations, they'll be a little bit easier, a little bit better. It's always easier to kind of discipline students who we have a relationship with. And so I would also, while you're kind of maintaining a consistent system for discipline, also be building relationships with them to kind of to balance it out. I want to engage the question that I asked Laura for a clarification on next. She said, what do you think of behavior charts? So, and she's talking about individual behavior charts. So what I'm thinking of when you say this, Laura, is you're thinking about kind of sticker charts. So if a student does well for math class, they get a sticker, and hopefully that will promote better behavior. So I think they're well intentioned, but I think they mainly address motivational issues. So when a student isn't motivated to do well, a behavior chart might work. I really believe that if students can do well, if they have the skills to do well, they will. And when students don't do well in the classroom, it's because they don't have the skills in that moment to do well. So if you think about it, LeBron, LeBron James just played in the All-Star game, like he can make lots and lots of threes, right? And he's, makes every shot. He made the shot at the end of the basketball game. But sometimes he misses too. And sometimes our students who can manage their emotions with lots of things or build really good relationships, sometimes they can't. Sometimes they can't sit still, right? So just because kids can show a skill in one area or at one time doesn't mean they can always do it. But that means that we need to help them apply that skill in that kind of domain or that time that they're struggling to do it. And so I think that when behavior charts are paired with skill building and teaching specific skills around what the behavior chart is targeting, then they can work. Then it can motivate, it can put the motivation piece in there, but also the skill building in which now we know you know how to do it, you've demonstrated it over and over again, we've practiced a lot. Now let's encourage you to show that skill, right, in each of these places throughout the day. So for example, if you're having a student who's like shouting out a lot, it may not be that they just don't want to engage in conversation. They may have some issues around impulse control. So some things that we can help with impulse control are, I used to play Jenga with students, right? And that really makes them stop and think, or red light, green light. And we can incorporate some math games in there, right? And that really makes them stop and think before they react and before they kind of like shoot their hand up. And then we can add the behavior chart or the motivational piece to that. But I think behavior charts on their own, I'm not sure, I haven't really seen a lot of success when you're just using the sticker charts around motivation. Hopefully that answered your question, Laura. Is there another one on there, Erica?
So it's more of, I think, a suggestion from Jason where he has noticed that appropriate academic rapport has been key in his experience. He's noticed that middle schoolers need to be promoted with a purpose and understanding. So he's tried facilitation of appropriate dialogue to be an exemptional way to incorporate this energy, but has found that there's circumstances where they need a leader. So a teacher-centered role has been something that has worked. Making the time to work one-on-one is critical as well.
Thank you, Jason. That's amazing. I love this idea, right? That middle schoolers need to be promoted with purpose and understanding. One resource that I found recently around this that maybe Geraldine can benefit from is, it's called Facing History, Facing Ourselves. I think sometimes our curriculums, to with best intention, can be removed from students' like lives a little bit. And the free resource Facing History, Facing Ourselves does provide a lot of really things that are contextual to our society, but also are using our standards to teach our students. And I think using their motivation can be helpful. I also like what Jason said around sometimes a teacher-centered approach, right, in which you're the facilitator, but not like the all-knowing knowledge, all knowledge comes from you, can really help with middle school. As we get more questions, I really appreciate all of these amazing questions. I want to direct your attention. We have a few minutes for more questions, but as they come in, direct your attention to the section on your dashboard that says handouts. So I've included 2 handouts for you guys. One is 15 SEL interventions, and you'll see in there the intervention I shared today around 2x10 came from that. But I think you'll find these interventions really easy to use in the classroom, kind of like quick for students. Small doses over a longer period of time is usually what we're going for with SEL. And then also a guide that I've had some parents and principals and teachers find really helpful for working with anxious students and how their parents can really help support them in the classroom. We're seeing a rise in anxiety in the classroom and depression, and oftentimes our parents, and we need some more kind of explicit ideas of how to support them in the classroom, and this guide can be really helpful. So we're on here for a few more minutes. If there are more questions coming through, I'm going to push my slides back a minute. Right, thinking about, do you have questions around creating a supportive environment for your students? Do you have questions about explicit SEL instruction? Most of our questions right now have been around that supportive environment because it's, it's a really important leg to this. And the last piece is, how do we integrate SEL and instruction? So are you seeing students who are having difficulty integrating some of those relationship skills or self-awareness or social awareness into the classroom, especially with, the mask optional has challenged our social awareness, right, and our social perspective taking with our students. All right, as you continue to type questions in, I'm a teacher, so I have a really long wait time. So if you're thinking, we don't have to use your name if you don't want us to use your name, but I wanted to share as you're writing more questions that there are a load kind of inputs in the ISI system of SEL resources for teachers. So besides the handouts I gave you through GoToWebinar, if you go to ISI and go to the OCS portal, so you can see my screen on the very top, it says OCS. Go to OCS and then you go to academic programs. Then you click on social emotional learning. You can find your way to my page. And on that page, on the right-hand side, you're going to see teacher resources. Some of the resources that I've shared here are there. Other ones are there too. There are free SEL curriculums that you can use. There are also ones that schools have purchased in the past, but there are lots of free resources online. If you just, at the end of the school year, want to try something new that you might integrate more next year, now's the kind of time to do it. See how students respond, and you can find some resources there. You can always talk to your principal about how this might work well in your classroom, in your school, and I can connect with your principal as well. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. So we'll give it one more minute and then we'll sign off. Those of you who asked questions, I really appreciate it. They were really, really good questions. You're obviously thinking really deeply about how you can support students with the challenges they're having. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Make sure to download those handouts. I will try to send kind of a follow-up email with the handouts, with the link to what I shared. I really appreciate all the questions and the time you were able to take today. Again, just a lot of gratitude from my office and from myself and your principals around how you're caring for students, how you're thinking about, I really encourage you to think about your own well-being as well as your students' well-being during this really tough school year. So hope you have a good night, and I will we'll sign off here. Take care, everyone.